Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Connor Russell, which you probably know. Today, I'm going to be talking about a number of different topics, starting with psychedelics, DMT, uh, Amazonian tribes. Probably go into the world religions and like wisdom traditions. Um, Talk about the pineal glands and maybe like ancient civilizations too. So to start, what is ayahuasca? Um, Ayahuasca is a psychoactive plant brew which is commonly used in the Amazon jungles by the tribes there. It contains two plants, Banisteriopsis caapi and Psychotria viridis. So Psychotria viridis, this plant is what contains the DMT, the NN dimethyltryptamine, which gives you a crazy psychedelic experience and out of body experiences and things like that. Whereas Banisteriopsis caapi contains beta-carbolines like harmine and harmaline. And these beta-carbolines are monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So the so normally, if you take DMT orally, it'll be broken down in the gut and won't be able to reach the bloodstream. It'll be broken down by monoamine oxidase. So by combining these two plants, you get the DMT from the Psychotria viridis, and you get the beta-carbolines, the monoamine oxidase inhibitors from the Banisteriopsis caapi vine. And these work together to allow to allow DMT to reach the bloodstream and then reach the brain where it exerts its intense psychedelic effects. How the Amazonian tribes discovered that the combination of these two drugs created a amazing psychedelic plant brew is unknown to at least to like Western science. If you ask a member of the tribe or a shaman, they'll say that the plants speak to them. The Maninkari are said to be spirits that inhabit and like animate the plants. And yeah, it said that the plants speak to them, and that's where they receive their botanical knowledge from. Another example of their botanical knowledge is in these. They take this substance from a type of plant. They use it. They like put it on the tips of their arrows or something like that. And when they shoot monkeys, it like, without killing them, it like makes them, kind of like paralyzes them, I guess, makes them fall off the vine. So they can then go get them and eat them. And the same substance is used in like Western medicine for a variety of reasons. And usually the people just come and take their medicinal and botanical knowledge and then profit on it without giving any credit or money to the tribes in the Amazon. But yeah, so I've never taken DMT, but I've read from Jeremy Narby and Graham Hancock and others that DMT kind of takes you to an entirely new world where there are entities that you can interact with and that want to interact with you, and that sometimes are benevolent or sometimes seem to be evil. They always seem to be incredibly wise and powerful. One of the most common experiences on DMT is twisting, intertwining snakes. And Jeremy Narby thinks that these intertwining snakes that are seen in DMT trips are basically like a manifestation of our DNA. He thinks that our DNA could be an intelligent entity, and DMT and other psychedelic drugs open up the channels of communication with it. For example, he's talked about how DNA, especially junk DNA with its repeating pattern, like AC, 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 like of the nucleotide bases, it's basically like a crystal, because crystals also have repeating organized patterns of their atoms. So, and crystals are really good at receiving light. So he thinks that or maybe it's transmitting light, I'm not sure, maybe both. But he thinks that the DNA may be able to transmit these photons, which sort of create our hallucinations. And possibly that they're able to, the DNA of plants is able to transmit photons that are then picked up by our DNA, which DNA transmitting photons and creating hallucinations. It's kind of supported by Istvan Bokon's idea that mental imagery is created by endogenous biophoton production in the brain. But yeah, these twisting snakes are kind of seen all around the world, or at least snakes, like divine serpents. The Shipibo Kanabo tribe in the Amazon has a snake called Ronin, which like encircles the whole world in their mythology. And the Australian Aborigines have the rainbow snake, which is like a creative principle and like divine force. And even the Norse mythology has a snake that wraps around the world. And then obviously it's also seen in Hinduism with the Kundalini symbol and the staff of Osiris and Hermes. And yeah, speaking of the staffs of Osiris and Hermes, this kind of goes into what Anthony Peake writes about, like the connections between the world's religions. So he points out that in many religions there are twisting, coiling snakes, and also a pine cone. For example, there's Hindu and Buddhism who have the twisting snakes, which then meets at these twisting snakes meet at the top, which is the top symbolizing the pineal gland. The two twisting snakes in Hinduism are called Ida and Pingala, and the thing that they coil around in the middle is called Sushumna or something like that. And then, yeah, they reach the top, and when prana flows up these, that's kind of like spiritual awakening or Kundalini awakening when it flows up these and reaches the top. And so, yeah, these twisting snakes are seen in there, for example, with Ida and Pingala, and then in the staff of Osiris, the staff of Hermes, and I think it's the staff of Osiris, or maybe Hermes, where they meet at the top. They meet a pine cone at the top. These pine cones are also seen at Angkor Wat, the massive Hindu/Buddhist temple. I think it's in Cambodia, maybe. But they have these ginormous like tower things, and at the top of them are 5 ginormous tower type things, and at the top of them are what seem to be pine cones. Pine cones are also seen in Freemasonry, on some of their temples. Also the Omphalos stones, which are found in Greece, which were apparently gifted to the Greeks by the ancient Egyptians. These sort of resemble pine cones too. So yeah, these twisting, coiling snakes and these pine cones are seen in all the world's religions as well as in the DMT realms. Um, and yeah, there's actually groups of people who believe that there's like a perennial wisdom that's at the origin of all the world's religions, and they look into this. And this is kind of what Anthony Peake talks about in his book, The Infinite Minefield. And yeah, the pine cone in these religions, it seems to represent the pineal gland because the pineal gland kind of looks like a pine cone. This pine cone is also seen in the Eleusinian Mysteries in ancient Greece. The twisting snakes are also seen in ancient Mesopotamia, like Sumeria. I believe the twisting snakes, they're associated with the god Enki, the Anunnaki god Enki. So, yeah, Anthony Peake believed that there was a major world religion that kind of passed down its ideas to all the current religions of today. And that's kind of similar to the idea of Graham Hancock's about the lost civilization that he believes traveled, or he believes their world was destroyed at the end of the Younger Dryas, 11,600 years ago. And after this, they spread around the world and took refuge with hunter-gatherers, and they shared their knowledge with them about the arts, architecture, agriculture. For example, in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, this advanced architecture seems to just have came out of nowhere, and the mainstream consensus is that hunter-gatherers built Göbekli Tepe, but it's kind of hard to see them doing this, especially when there was no like gradual build up to this. There weren't like smaller sites found around the area. It's just no architecture, and then all of a sudden there's Göbekli Tepe. And the oldest layers of Göbekli Tepe go back to 11,600 years ago as well. Which is the end of the Younger Dryas in the Ice Age, when it's thought that due to all the melting glaciers that sea level would have drastically risen, and just global cataclysms would have been occurring. So yeah, Hancock's theory is that the people from this lost civilization that's unknown to today's scientists, they went to Göbekli Tepe. They instructed the hunter-gatherers there, helped them, guided them in building this massive monument that's Göbekli Tepe. What's interesting about Göbekli is that the oldest layers seem to be the biggest and the most sophisticated, and then the later ones aren't as well made. Kind of like the Great Pyramids, which there's the Great Pyramids of Giza, and then after they get smaller and less well constructed. Claus Smith, the guy who excavated, the lead excavator at Göbekli Tepe, he believes that this is where agriculture was also first practiced. I believe it was 50 kilometers or 50 miles south of Göbekli Tepe. That's actually where the first domestication of crops is thought to have occurred. So the Mesoamericans, like the Aztecs, their main god is Quetzalcoatl. He's which means feathered serpent in their language. He's said to come to Mesoamerica out of nowhere, kind of, with other gods, I believed. And these Quetzalcoatl instructed them. He was like a bringer of civilization. He brought them architecture, the arts, agriculture, kind of similar to what happened in Göbekli Tepe. And in Mesopotamia, Sumeria, there's the gods called Oannes. Wait. There's the gods Oannes. Wait. Hold on one sec. There were the gods Oannes. Oannes is what it's called. And these were also called the bringers of civilization. And what connects Göbekli Tepe with Quetzalcoatl and Oannes. Okay, so Oannes. Oannes. So these were thought by Mesopotamians to have been, he was thought to be a bringer of civilization as well. What connects the Oannes with Quetzalcoatl and Göbekli Tepe is that they all seem to be associated with these weird, like, little handbag things. So at Göbekli Tepe, on one of the pillars, I forgot to mention, at Göbekli Tepe, there's about 200 giant T-shaped pillars. And Graham Hancock noticed on one of them that there were these, like a row of these handbag type things. And then he began connecting dots and seeing that in the first depicted image of Quetzalcoatl, there seems to be a man in the image holding what looks to be the same handbag. And Oannes as well, in his depictions, he's also holding a handbag. So he thinks this might be sort of equivalent to like the Freemason handshake or the Freemason hand in the jacket, which like symbolizes that they're part of the club, or like that they're in on the same secret. And he thinks that Quetzalcoatl and Oannes might be symbolic for the actual human bringers of civilization that left their homeland and settled with these different regions after the cataclysms at the end of the last ice age. And they think, some people think, Hancock at least thinks, that this civilization might have been Atlantis, which is talked about by Helena Blavatsky, the girl who created Theosophy, and as well as Plato. So Plato's great-grandfather, I believe, his name was Solon. He visited ancient Egypt in 600 BCE, and he was told there by the high priests in Egypt at the time that there was a lost civilization which was destroyed by floods, and its name was Atlantis, and it was destroyed 9,000 years ago, which is 9600 BCE, which is this marks the end of the Younger Dryas and also marks the oldest layers at Göbekli Tepe. So it's thought that maybe after the Atlanteans' home was destroyed, which is thought to be somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, thought to be a seafaring civilization. So after their home was destroyed by floods, they settled around the world in Mesoamerica, Mesopotamia, Turkey, probably lots of other places, and they kind of brought civilization. They brought architecture, agriculture, the arts, all this knowledge, and shared it with the hunter-gatherers there. There's also the story of Maui in like Hawaii and stuff, I think, who was also said to have like saved civilization. And this Atlantis theory it's a big part of Theosophy, which is uh, Helena Blavatsky's sort of like religion or mystic tradition. So according to that, there were 7 root races and 7 sub races. There were I'm blanking, the Polarians, okay. Sorry about my dog. So there were the Polarians, the Hyperboreans, the Lemurians, the Atlanteans, and then there were the Aryans, which the Aryans are what the Aryans or Aryans were said to be part of that race. So yeah, it's interesting, all these accounts of Atlantis from Plato, from Theosophy, and Hancock's connections between these bringers of civilizations and the Younger Dryas and Atlantis as well. So going back to DMT, Rick Strassman, he did extensive research on DMT. He was sort of the first person to revive DMT studies after they were kind of like disbanded by the government in like the 60s and 70s and the hippie era and the psychedelic drug era, because a general kind of fear of psychedelics arose over the country. But Rick Strassman went through all the troubles of going through his ethics committee and the FDA and the DEA to get like the permits and the clearance to perform these studies and to legally get the drug DMT. So he began administering volunteers intravenously through an IV with DMT. He found that the optimal dose is 0.4 milligrams per kilogram body weight. And he found that after 30 seconds, its effects would start. After 2 minutes or so, it would peak. And then after 5 minutes, it would start coming down. Some of the most commonly experienced things from his participants were like spiraling staircases or ducts or channels, a sense of like hyperdimensionality or dimensionlessness of the things around them, and also like life-changing experiences reported by all of them. Strassman created some theories on DMT, for example, that it's like a reality modulator, that it kind of helps us tune in to different realities, one of them being like sober, normal, material reality. Just like how it lets us tune into the reality experience when you actually take DMT. Because DMT it's naturally produced endogenously in the brain. It's thought to be produced by the pineal gland by some people. What's interesting is that the pineal gland also produces pinoline, which is another beta-carboline like harmine and harmonine found in Banisteriopsis caapi. So we kind of have our own ayahuasca type situation going on in the brain. We also contain methyltransferase enzymes, which and tryptamine, which are like the building blocks of DMT. DMT is just tryptamine with 2 methyl groups added, and I believe tryptamine derives from tryptophan. So we have all the ingredients to make it, and it's been found in the body as well. We have a few defenses against it rising though to psychedelic type levels, because obviously that wouldn't be good for survival in the wilderness. or in any society or civilization. And some of these there's a anti-DMT substance which slows or dampens the activity of methyltransferase enzymes. There's cells around the pineal gland, which are kind of like a defense mechanism for the pineal gland, and these prevent overactivation of the pineal gland by adrenaline and noradrenaline. So yeah, these cells prevent activation of the pineal gland by noradrenaline and adrenaline, which are able to stimulate the pineal gland. For example, they've been shown to stimulate the pineal gland into making melatonin. I believe only adrenaline and noradrenaline can activate it, and not brain-derived catecholamines. And then there's also monoamine oxidase that prevents us from having an endogenous psychedelic experience. But if there's increased methyltransferase activity, or the anti-DMT substance isn't working as well for some reason, or endogenous beta-carbolines rise and inhibit monoamine oxidase, or adrenaline and noradrenaline get too high in like super stressful conditions, then endogenous DMT production could reach pretty high levels and create some type of psychedelic experience. So Strassman believes that this heightened spontaneous DMT production by the pineal gland of the brain could be behind psychosis, like hallucinations and schizophrenia or other types of mental disorders. I'm not sure if he suggests this, but I think that it could be behind like alien abduction experiences, or seeing ghosts or stuff like that, or other or even like spontaneous out-of-body experiences, or any type of out-of-body experience. Like endogenous production gets too high, which it could easily do in sleep, could give us the sense that we're interacting with, or not just give us a sense, it could actually allow us to interact with other entities, and maybe some of these are aliens, like hyperdimensional aliens from other dimensions, or maybe it just creates the intense hallucinations of an alien abduction experience. It's also thought by some that DMT mediates dreaming, which does make sense because the pineal gland becomes more active in sleep, for example, with its production of melatonin. And the dreams are almost like a psychedelic experience. Like some say that we astral project in our dreams. We're going to the astral plane, which could be the same place that's visited by people who take DMT or ayahuasca. So yeah, DMT could be involved in psychosis, dreaming, out-of-body experiences, astral projection, and of course is involved in bringing us to the different non-material realms where we can interact with other entities, which is experienced by people who take it. Andrew Gallimore, who's from Tokyo University, I think, maybe Kyoto University, he's putting people on IV drips of DMT so that they can, rather than the experience only lasting a few minutes or a few hours. It can last like 12 hours or 12 days or 12 months even. So yeah, volunteers are getting these long-term IV drips of DMT so that they can stay in that state for a long time. And he's hoping that they can sort of map the DMT realm and maybe engage in like true like long-term dialogue with the entities in the DMT realm, and maybe like start understanding the language of the DMT entities. So this is pretty interesting research, and he sees no limit to it. Like maybe they could keep people in the DMT realm for like a year or something, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, it could provide some information as to what's actually going on in these DMT realms, and what these entities are, if they're real, if they're not. Some people would say that they're all created by the brain. Maybe aspects of the deep unconscious bubbling up. But others like Graham Hancock or Jeremy Narby or Terence McKenna, they would say these entities are 100% real, with their own agency and their own motives and whatnot. So in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo state is said to be the state in between our lives. Like we go there after we die before we resurrect into a new life form. And they say that we remain in the Bardo state for 49 days until and on the 49th day, I guess that's when we're reincarnated. What's interesting is that at day 49 of fetus development, that's when like gender becomes differentiated, like they either become a boy or a girl, and it's also when the pineal gland begins to form. Strassman has suggested that the pineal gland and its DMT production could help us like reincarnate possibly, or even just like our soul even if there's no reincarnation, just it could assist our soul into coming into our consciousness or mind or whatever, to come into our bodies during fetal development, or in reincarnation it does the same thing. And it could also help us our souls move on after we die. So yeah, on day 49 of fetal development, when the pineal gland develops, this could also be when we reincarnate from the Bardo state, which is also said to be 49 days. Or it could just be a interesting coincidence. It could also, DMT could be rising in mothers during childbirth as well. The intense stress of this situation could cause production of adrenaline or noradrenaline to reach very high heights, and this could override the pineal defense system and trigger endogenous DMT production. I believe stress can increase the methyltransferase enzymes. And back to like the psychosis topic, I think methyltransferase enzymes are thought to be more active in psychotic individuals. And I think a study found that the blood levels of DMT were correlated with like the intensity of psychotic symptoms. And Michael Persinger has suggested that, like, I believe he was talking about how like vertical seismic waves from the earth could be responsible for like spontaneous experiences of aliens or apparitions. The these seismic waves would ascend vertically to high levels and also cover large distances horizontally. So if anybody in that area, if anyone's in the area of the range area of the fields, he would probably say that it could activate their right temporal lobe, which is known to evoke the feeling of a sense presence, but it could also maybe induce endogenous DMT production. Magnetic fields, Persinger also found, is associated with like sense presences or viewing apparitions. So perhaps magnetic fields have a way of interacting with the pineal gland and increasing the DMT production. He, in a study, he also pointed out how the amount of people like being admitted to psych wards for like psychotic illnesses were higher, I believe, around the spring equinox. That could be involved in increasing DMT production as well in the brain and the pineal gland. In another study, it was either him or Stanley Krippner, they reported that I think like viewing apparitions, or no, psychic abilities increase on the nights with low geomagnetic activity. So maybe this lowered geomagnetic activity allowed extremely low frequency fields or other types of fields to stimulate the pineal gland as well. I want to go back to the topic of Atlantis. So in I believe it was, can't remember what the temple was called. I think it was like the F2 temple or something in ancient Egypt. Archaeologists like found inscriptions talking about an island called the Island of the Eggs. And this is supposedly where like the first creation took place, and this is where the divine gods like created their domains. But unfortunately, they say that some snake came and attacked the gods and destroyed the island, caused the island to split and all the divine gods to perish. But then apparently, and darkness fell upon the island. But then, after some time, light shined upon the island again, and new gods arose from, I believe it was called the underworld of the souls. And these gods, left the island and went to Egypt and created new divine lands there. But they said that these new divine domains were simply like recreations of a vanished, truly divine place. So there's this island, and then in Mesoamerican mythology, Quetzalcoatl was said to come from a burning island as well. It's on the Xochicalco or something, pyramid or temple in Mesoamerica. around the whole thing, like basically the whole thing wraps a like coiling snake, which is, I think, represents Quetzalcoatl. And at one portion it shows a man in a boat who's fleeing some sort of island as well. So these two could be representations of the Atlanteans leaving their island and coming and bringing civilization to Mesoamerica and Egypt. Now that we're on the topic of Egypt, let's talk a bit about the Sphinx. So, mainstream views about the Sphinx are that it's from 2500 BCE. But Robert Scotch and John Anthony West and another guy, his last name was like Schwaller or something. Based on the water erosion on the body of the Sphinx, they believe that this water erosion could have only occurred during periods of heavier rainfall between like 9,000 and 3,000 BCE. So they date the Sphinx to a much earlier time period, but this view is denied by Egyptologists because it threatens to like undermine the foundations of their field. John Anthony West has claimed the Sphinx could be even as old as like 37,000 years old or something like that. So the Sphinx is thought to be a lion, to depict a lion. Originally, they believed that there was a lion head there, not just a person's head, because the head has no water erosion and it's completely disproportionate with the rest of its body. But Robert Temple, he thinks that the Sphinx better represents a dog or like some type of canine or some type of dog-related species or something, because there's no tuft on the end of the tail of the Sphinx. And it's like a lion, its thighs, when it's like laying down, they go above its back, but that doesn't seem to happen. And also there's no mane on the Sphinx. So he believes it's more accurately like representing a type of dog. He also thinks that he acknowledges that there's water erosion on the Sphinx, but he says that this, just because there's water erosion doesn't mean that it needs to be built in an earlier time period, because he's of the belief that the Egyptians the Egyptians deliberately filled the pit around the Sphinx with water. He, in his book, The Serious Mystery, he mentions a couple accounts by the Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt and studied their structures and their culture and stuff like that. Herodotus reported that water, many times rose to the Giza Plateau, either by flooding or by irrigation channels. He also speaks of a river associated with the pyramid of Khephren. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's the second largest pyramid there. The biggest one being the pyramid of Cheops. But yeah, this river associated with the Khephren pyramid is said to come in and encircle an island. And at the center of this island, he said, lie Cheops. Robert Temple interprets this account as Herodotus actually seeing the Sphinx depicting Cheops' face encircled with this pit of water, which was maybe connected to channel that the Egyptians created. Because oftentimes throughout history, like ancient history, the Sphinx would be completely covered in sand, or at least covered in sand up to its head. So it could be that when Herodotus visited Egypt, it was at a time when the Sphinx was covered, with just its head showing, just the possible face of Cheops showing. So he may have just viewed this head, the rest buried under sand, and seen the water surrounding it, and called this an island encircled by a river with the face of Cheops in the middle, when really it was just the Sphinx's head depicting Cheops, with the pit of water around it. And Temple thinks that, along with people like Chris Hardy and Eric von Daniken, that we were visited by aliens in our past. In Temple's case, especially, he thinks the Anunnaki visited us. The Anunnaki are well documented by and I guess named by all the accounts of the Anunnaki basically come from Mesopotamia. They were said to be these these amphibious creatures who came down and kind of worked with Mesopotamia and helped them. I think ruled over them to some degree. So Temple thinks that surrounding the Sphinx with water could have been like a way to defend the knowledge or the objects hidden in a possible chamber underneath the Sphinx. If the Sphinx was surrounded in water and the knowledge and objects were hidden underneath, this would prevent any human from going and retrieving the objects, because obviously they would need scuba gear. But for an amphibious creature like the Anunnaki, they could easily swim under and access the whatever important things they were hiding under there. A lot of Temple's work focuses on the Dogon tribe of Mali. This tribe is extremely interesting because they seem to have gained all this knowledge that should be impossible for any tribe without telescopes and other technologies. So the Dogon tribe, for a long time, they've known of Sirius B, which is a white dwarf star that in a binary star system was Sirius A, the much bigger and much brighter star. We can see the Sirius system with our visible eye. You could see it at night, maybe tonight. But it just appears as one star, like most binary star systems do, to the naked eye. But using high-powered telescopes, you can see Sirius B. But the Dogon tribe obviously didn't have these high-powered telescopes. So how they had knowledge of this, of Sirius B, is how that question hasn't been posed or answered. How they have that knowledge. They seem to have known that it's a white dwarf too, because they called Sirius B like the heaviest and the smallest object in the sky. And white dwarfs are extremely dense, extremely small, and extremely heavy. They use like I forget the actual name, but like phonio grain. They associated that with the white dwarf star. Phonio is like a massive. It's like a massive staple of the massive staple food source for the Dogon tribe, And so, yeah, they associated this with the white dwarf star. They seem to know, that it was a white dwarf. Just that they knew the existence of Sirius B is amazing, let alone that it's a white dwarf. And they also knew that Sirius B had an elliptical orbit, which, thanks to Kepler, we know that all planets and stars have elliptical orbits. But they knew somehow that Sirius B has an elliptical orbit around Sirius A, and they knew that Sirius A occupied one of the two foci points of the elliptical orbit of Sirius B. So within orbits, there are two foci points, and the central mass object has to occupy one of these foci points, or else the orbit doesn't work, basically. So they knew that Sirius A occupied one of the foci points, which is amazing without any types of advanced telescopes, or really any technology. I've heard that they may have been able to see Sirius B because maybe they had like super advanced eyesight, but I don't know. I don't think there's much accuracy to that claim. Temple believes that they were, and the Dogon themselves believe that they were visited by aliens who they called the Nomo. I think they saw these as gods, the Nomo. They said when the Nomo visited them, a new star appeared in the sky, which Temple thinks could have been their like larger base sitting in orbit. The Nomo's larger base sitting in orbit. And the Dogons also had knowledge about like blood circulation, and that the blood circulates the body, and different types of biological knowledge as well. So maybe these Nomo were the same as the Anunnaki. Maybe these Nomo were the same beings as the Anunnaki that visited Mesopotamia and might have visited Egypt, or maybe there's a connection between the Nomo and the Anunnaki and even the Atlantis theories. So a little more about Egypt. Andrea Puharich, one day he received a call from his friend. I can't remember her name, but she told Andrea about a man who was over at her house, and the moment she handed him like an ancient Egyptian amulet, he entered a crazy trance state. Like wouldn't speak and seemed to be like looking off in the distance and was unresponsive for a long time. So Puharich decided that he wanted to see this for himself, so they all had like dinner together. And again that night, his name was Harry Stone. Harry Stone slipped into another trance, and during which he had multiple trance states later on as well, during which he would speak ancient Egyptian, and write perfect ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. And it seemed that like ancient Egyptian gods or kings were channeling through Stone. He drew during one of his trance states, he drew a picture of a mushroom-looking plant that he said was like a yellow plant with spots, and the ointment of which, if you rub it on your head, it like separates the soul from the body. So Andrea sort of came to the conclusion that this was the Amanita muscaria mushroom, or the fly agaric mushroom. It comes in a red and a yellow variety. So yeah, it could. This could have been an ancient Egyptian entity channeling through Harry Stone. Like this entity could have been dead for 3,000 years, but it may have channeled into Stone and gave knowledge about an old psychedelic practice in ancient Egypt. Pierre Rich himself did experiments with fly agaric, which contains muscarinic acid, I think. He found that it creates a parasympathetic state in the body, and it's seen to be it seemed to increase psychic abilities. Parasympathetic nervous system activation in general seems to be conducive to psi. For example, in another Pierre Rich book called Beyond Telepathy, the first book where the Harry Stone information is from is called The Sacred Mushroom. But the other book, Beyond Telepathy, he tells the account of a man who was like welding underneath the streets of Boston, and then the trench collapsed on him, and he was pretty injured, but he was still alive. So obviously he was in a state of sympathetic nervous system activation. And a few blocks away, his friend was working, probably in a parasympathetic state, because he was like relaxed. I think he was like off work or something. And he gained this sudden urge to go check on his friend, like for no reason. He just had this urge, and he went and checked on his friend and found that he was collapsed underneath the road, or the road had collapsed on him. He was covered. And yeah, he was able to call for help and save his friend. So the man who the road collapsed in was in a sympathetic state, which seems to be conducive to telepathic sending. His friend was in a parasympathetic state, which seems to be associated with telepathic receiving. So yeah, so the parasympathetic activation by Amanita muscaria, the sacred mushroom from ancient Egypt, was probably responsible for its psychic abilities. So yeah, this could this information from Harry Stone in his trance could be indicating that there was psychedelic drug use in ancient Egypt sometime. The origins of psychedelic drug use are kind of unknown. It's thought Gordon Wasson, who's like a mycologist, thinks that in the ancient Hindu texts there's mention of a drug called soma, I believe, which could separate the soul from the body as well. Many people believe that this is probably a psychedelic, and I think Gordon Wasson thinks this might have been Amanita muscaria as well. So kind of a striking similarity there between Hinduism and Egypt. And also in the Eleusinian Mysteries in ancient Greece. This was an ancient mystery cult dedicated to the gods Demeter and Persephone. I don't know the entire story, but Persephone was said to be abducted by Hades to the underworld, and then but one day like Demeter was able to get her back, and it has to do with like death and rebirth and like giving fertility to like the crops and the agriculture. These are the myths surrounding the Eleusinian Mysteries. But yeah, they would occur in the city of Eleusis, near Athens. It was a initiation, so the initiates would come, and they would go through the ceremony and drink what people think is a psychedelic wine, and they would have these visions and experiences, and everyone who went said it's like the most life-changing experience. I believe Plato and even Aristotle spoke of it. I think they ran from 2000 BCE to like 400 AD. Albert Hoffman, the man who first discovered LSD and psilocybin as well, the active ingredient, and magic mushrooms, he thinks that the ingredient in the psychedelic wine could have been ergo novine, or a chemical similar to LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, I think, because he's found in different types of ergot. He's found ergo novine, which is psychedelic, ergotoxine, which is non-psychedelic, and ergotamine, which is non-psychoactive as well. I think he's also found lysergic acid amide, which is really close to LSD, 25, and lysergic dihydroxy amide or something like that, which they're both psychedelic and very closely related to LSD. And they're derived from ergot, which is a disease caused by fungus, which infects like rye and wheat and different types of grasses. I think rye wasn't available in ancient Greece, just wheat and barley. So Hoffman thinks that they could have used the chemicals from the ergot on these plants. But there's also two grasses that grow around Greece, that grew around Greece at that time. One was called Lolium, I think, also known as darnel. And the other grass, I can't remember the name of it, but he says that these were probably a better option for creating the psychedelic wine, which is called kykeon, because they only contained the water-soluble psychoactive compounds like ergonovine, lysergic acid amide. They didn't contain the insoluble, non-psychoactive ergotamine or ergotoxine, or whatever they're called. Those grasses only contain the psychoactive chemicals. So he thought that the priests or the guides at the Eleusinian Mysteries could have possibly began with wheat and barley ergot and then moved on to the grasses that are also infected with the fungus which causes ergot. And this fungus is called claviceps. Different varieties of claviceps create the ergot, which then you can derive psychoactive LSD-like compounds from. Um, and yeah, so the Eleusinian Mysteries, they could have definitely been using psychedelic type drugs, which induce these visions and these life changing experiences. And it's good to point out that like all the important people in ancient Greece basically took part in the Eleusinian Mysteries. So yeah, just back to the connections between all the world's religions. The pineal gland, light, twisting snakes seem to be a large part of them. I forgot to mention earlier that in Zoroastrianism, they wear like the things around their heads, the turban type things around their heads, which is thought to protect the pineal gland. Their god, I believe, was also like a being of light. In Kabbalah, there's Ein Sof, who was like their god, kind of, who created Adam Kadmon, I believe his name was. And Cadman like projected the primordial light from himself. This light was then contained in these glass vessels. It's also something to do with the like these sacred letters in Kabbalah, but so these glass vessels containing the light apparently broke, and this light or like the these like sacred letters fell and created this this kind of like deranged world below the divine world of light. This world, I think, is thought to be what we inhabit now. It's just similar to like the pleroma described in Gnosticism, which is like an imperfect world separate from the true world. And I can't remember if this is in Gnosticism or Kabbalah, but apparently there's like a divine light or like divine essence in all of us in the deranged imperfect world, and this divine essence is always trying to get back to the perfect world of light. Sufism, I believe, one of the like major philosophers, Sufi philosophers, speaks of a world of light as well, that borders on two other worlds. In Islam, in their prayers, they like put their forehead down to the ground, which Anthony Peake says would increase blood flow to their pineal gland, and possibly stimulate like endogenous DMT production. In Taoism, we're said to have these like areas in our body which capture chi or prana, called Tan Tians. And the highest one is in our brain, which could represent our pineal gland. And when the prana or the light reaches this upper Tan Tien, called the Crystal Palace, a massive flooding of light occurs and sort of like an awakening occurs. This Crystal Palace could be a symbolic, like a metaphor for the pineal gland. The pineal gland is thought to be surrounded by like mini crystals, which they call like brain sand or pineal sand. So yeah, these imperfect worlds talked about in Gnosticism and Kabbalah, In other religions, these could be the material realm, and possibly these other worlds, perfect worlds of light. Maybe these are what are unveiled when you take psychedelic drugs, especially DMT. Like the pleroma and the perfect world of light, apart from this deranged world, supposed deranged world, could be what's experienced in the DMT experience, perhaps. In Theosophy, and in Hinduism, they speak of like cycles, these super long cycles, which begin with like a divine being manifesting in a physical human form, and then over time, this divine being becomes like more deranged and degenerate and non-divine due to as a consequence of its entering into matter. Once it reaches like the lowest threshold, like the farthest away from divinity, the cycle is said to restart. In Hinduism, there's 4 or 5 cycles. In some interpretations, after the last cycle, everything restarts back at like a golden divine age. Yeah, but in other interpretations, we go from like the divine age to the like more like deranged age, and then we have to work ourselves back up to the golden age. So yeah, perhaps these the beginning of these cycles with the divine entering matter is somehow connected with the idea of like these other worlds of light, immaterial worlds of light and beauty and divinity that were kind of separate from, like perhaps those realms where the divine essence first comes from before the enter into matter. But yeah, this is all just like theorizing. This world that we're in could be the perfect world as well, because I think it's pretty beautiful and amazing. But it's also good to know that there could be like higher worlds of light out there. Yeah, I think that's gonna about do it. Kind of ran out of stuff to talk about. I ran out of stuff that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed everything. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to make another one of these soon. Or I will be able to make another one of these soon. So yeah, thank you for listening, and hope you guys have a great day and week.